Kind of a Vision Sunday. If you're a visitor or a guest with us, so glad that you are here today. We're going to take a break from our series, Jesus Through the Eyes of John, because here at the start of essentially a new ministry year, and more specifically, another 4 to 5 months before we actually make the move across the street, it's important that we all get on the same page about that. And so again, some of the casting vision for this new season that we find ourselves in after many years, a season of momentum, a season of preparation, a season of thanksgiving, and ultimately a season of celebration. We want to make sure we're all on the same page about understanding that, celebrating, thanking the Lord for it, etc. You know, Hatley and Christy were here earlier this morning talking about their ministry, and Harry referenced the fact that they had this vision a long time ago to see some of the things that are just now bearing fruit for them in their place of service, just coming to fruit. And that's what this church has been all about from the beginning: prayer, patience, and persistence. Because this kind only comes out through prayer and fasting. And this isn't a typical type of church that they plant, etc., around the country. This is a unique place, and others like us. In fact, this morning, Corey Sanders launches his church. Corey and Robert this morning, brand new in Homestead, Florida. Trey Grant, it's happening as we speak. They launched in their church. Trey Grant, a guy we've coached, is over in Keller, Texas, launching a multi-ethnic church today. But the guys that we coach and what we've come to learn is this kind only comes out through prayer and fasting, along with that patience and that persistence, because if it came out another way, man would get the glory. But when you have to be prayerful, patient, and persistent to stay on that flight, to keep on keeping on until God, in a sense, aligns all the stars, His way, His time. When it happens, then everyone will know God did it, and to the glory of God. Matthew 5:16, amen. So that's where we find ourselves here in this season. This is a story of God's glory, and what a privilege it is for us to be a part of that. Now, so all that's to say is we're going to take the break from Jesus Through the Eyes of John, spend some time in vision over the next 4 months. And if you would turn in your Bible to start Joshua chapter 1, because we are not unique in this regard, bodies of Christ, and particularly the Israelites of old, wandering through the wilderness for 40 years, right? In fact, I've mentioned this before, and I'd never taken the time to look it up. I've always said in my head, and I've said it even here publicly, that, you know, it probably took, from the time that the Israelites left Egypt, it was probably a 2 to 3 month walk to get to the Promised Land. I was wrong. Do you know how long it takes? 11 days. 11 days walk is what it should have taken a group of people to leave Egypt and to arrive at the Promised Land. It took 40 years to go 11 days. Isn't that incredible? And then you think, well, why did that happen? Why 40 years? Well, of course, many people would cite the grumbling, the complaining, the testing of God, ultimately the sin. Sin was in the camp. We get that phrase, sin in the camp, from some of the sin that happened at that time. And certainly the grumbling, complaining, there was sin in the camp, etc. That was totally true. But if you think about it, in that 40-year period, there was preparation going on. And not only was God preparing the people for a new season in the existence of the nation of Israel, for a new land, God had to do His thing and prepare them for that, but also the people had to prepare themselves. Because the mindset in Egypt is going to be a different mindset than they are in the Promised Land. What it took to survive, to live, to thrive, etc., in the Promised Land is different, or would be different, than what it takes to thrive, survive, etc., in the Promised Land, right? Some of the things were going to go with them, right? They had to figure out, well, what makes us Israelites? What is DNA to us? Because that DNA doesn't change, whether you're in Egypt, whether you're in the Promised Land. Who we are doesn't change. But how we practice who we are, how we live out who we are, those forms, as it were, that follow function, those things would change. So when you think about why 40 years, you know, I don't know why it was 40 and not 10 or 15 or 5, but what I do know, and what is very clear from Scripture, is God was preparing them as a people for a brand new season. And without that time in the wilderness, they wouldn't have been prepared the way God would have wanted. And likewise, the people had to prepare themselves. And you see that throughout that Scripture. So it was a time for them to prepare themselves. For instance, how certain things would remain the same. They had to understand that. How certain things would change. How they would have to change with those things, right? And ultimately, what it would take to actually take possession of the land. All of that they had to figure out in those 40 years during that time, and it took that time, right? And at the end of that, right when they were right when they were coming out of Egypt and about to possess the land. You'll remember this from Joshua chapter 1. This actually comes from a speech or teaching that Moses did to the people. Joshua picks it up. Remember Joshua 1:8, be strong in the Lord. The Lord's talking to him, be strong and courageous, right? And take the land. So God speaks to Joshua like Moses did. Have courage, take strength in the Lord. That very famous passage, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, then you will have success. Joshua, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. God had to speak to Moses for a new season to lead. So he goes on then. Joshua takes that encouragement from the Lord, that calling, as it were, his leadership. And then verse 10, it says this, then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves. For within 3 days you are to cross this Jordan to go possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess it. So after he takes strength in all this, at that transition moment, he says, in 3 days we're moving. Everybody pick up the stakes, get ready, prepare yourselves. The time of our move is at hand. And essentially that's what I'm doing this morning. I am saying, like Joshua told the people in the past, I'm saying, prepare yourselves. The time of our move is at hand. And we need to take up our provisions, prepare ourselves. What remains the same? What do we change? All of those things. How do we prepare ourselves in these next 4 months to take possession, as it were, of that land? Because as we've said all along, it's not just a building. It's not a facility. That's a very concrete, pragmatic thing you can say. We're moving to a new building, moving to a new facility. But, of course, those of you who've been here a long time know it's never been about a building. It's not about a building. But it does mark a new season. It's like one book is closed, a new book opens. You know, like sequels, right? I saw Mission Impossible, Linda and I, this week. That's like the 3rd or 4th installment. So same characters, some new things, some that stays the same, and you have to figure all that out. That's exactly where we find ourselves here on September 13th, 2015, with a move date ahead. And now leadership on behalf of the elders, our staff, saying to the people, as Joshua said then, prepare yourselves, make provision, because the day of our move is at hand. Praise God, and that's what we'll talk about this morning. By the way, when you think about this journey of 40 years, we have lived that Exodus story. Do you realize that? I'm serious when I say this. 9 years today has got to be like 40 years then. You know what I'm saying? Like in our day and age, 9 years is like 40 years. I mean, it feels like forever. We've lost people on the way. It's been hard along the way. We've grumbled. We've complained. You know, all this stuff, we've had to just depend on God and been right there at the last moment to watch him come through in different ways that he's done, you know, in all that time. In that 9 years, we've only had to walk 3 blocks. Like, that's it. Like, not 11 days, like 3 blocks. That's all we had to go. So when I think about 9 years and 3 blocks, I'm thinking like 40 years, 11 days journey. I think we're pretty equivalent on that. You know, like it's about the same, right? And but like the Israelites, why didn't this happen 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago? Well, think about it. God has been preparing us. This is the honest truth. We wouldn't have been ready 5 years ago to go and take possession of that building and all that would mean in a new season, new chapter of the ministry. We weren't prepared. We didn't, the right mindset, attitude, staff, finances, so many ways we weren't prepared. We would have wanted it, but we weren't prepared. God has been preparing us. We've been preparing ourselves, particularly 3 or 4 years ago when we realized after 10 years that our church was really more of an 80% a mission and 20% a church, if you will. Right? But how are we going to sustain mission long term? So 3 to 4 years ago, we realized we've got to become a stronger church, right? In terms of like what we do with our children, what we do with our students, how we get together in small groups and strengthen ourselves as a church. And God showed us that, and we've been on that track. Said, let's do that over the next 5 to 10 years so that we've got kind of a 50% mission, 50% church, so that mission can be sustained long term. God has been preparing us. We've been preparing ourselves. So this is why that time, but at the end of the day, it's also that God alone can be glorified. It happened in his way, in his time, so that he alone would be glorified, and we've been learning that. And frankly, I'd say this, and we'll go on. But, I'm just making this up. But let's say somebody just magically dropped a $10 million check in the offering, and you could take that $10 million and you could go build, do what you want, and you get a bill and you do it, and it takes like 5-6 months, and then you go, hey, everybody come on in. You see what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't turn that down, don't get me wrong. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, looking back to have traveled this journey of 9 full years, because that's what it's going to be, 9 full years from the day we gave Mike Montgomery a check in December 10th, 2006, it's going to be like 9 years and 3 weeks that we had to journey. You look back, and I'm speaking for me personally, who I've become, what I've endured, how much I've grown, how much I've learned from God. I know that's been true for us collectively as a body. And you get to the end of it and you go, I wouldn't trade it for anything. But on the front end, if I would have known it, I'd say, man, I'm not signing up for this journey. You know what I'm saying? But isn't that God? And he's like that in our lives. So this is what I don't want you to miss here, not only today, but in this season, is I do want you as individuals, as a church, for all of us collectively, to really reflect on the privilege we've had to be a part of this story. Because just like the Israelites of old, there's something very spiritual. There's something very unique that God has done in this body and is doing that I've been a pastor 33 years, and I've been in great churches, had a lot of, but this is a very unique journey. And I for one, feel so blessed to have been a part of it. And I don't even fully understand what it means, but I just know, I guess I've lived long enough to know that God has done something and is doing something unique. And what a chance to be a part of that story that he's writing, and what we've journeyed and how we've learned and who we would not be if it had happened anywhere, any other way. You know what I'm saying? So I praise God for that. So Father, we want to pray right now as we consider the future. We thank you for the privilege we've had to journey like this, Lord, and what lies ahead of us in a season of momentum and preparation and thanksgiving and celebration. But we just want to pause and say that we are mindful of the analogy to Israel and the wandering and the time and the lessons that are there, and help us as individuals in the church not to just gloss over that and pass over that, but to, in this season, reflect on that and to consider, what have you done in us? What have you shown us as individuals? What have you shown us collectively as a church? What are you saying to the macro church at large by writing this story of Mosaic Church, Lord? We want to be mindful that there are lessons there. We're mindful your hand is all over that you alone are to be praised and glorified. Show us those things. Help us to celebrate and to declare those things so that you alone would be glorified and magnified through our work in the days to come, as you have in the past, far into the future. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, it is a season of momentum, preparation, thanksgiving, celebration. Say that with me. Momentum, right? Preparation, thanksgiving, and celebration. We're in that season right now. And so I want to start with just kind of an overview of the next 4 into January months. And I've got a handout for you that you can take home with a bunch of this stuff on it. And I'm not giving it to you because y'all be like people in school and you wouldn't listen to me if I did. So I'm going to make you wait on that. We're going to get it later, all right? But I did put a few slides together for you. So let's start right with this. Let's just start with where we're at. Here. Obviously, today is our Vision Sunday in September, and James, we'll go to those slides now, if you would. One of the things that's happening in the month of September as well is circles are being inaugurated. And so I want to encourage you. In fact, on the handout, I said October 4th is the start week. It's actually September 20th is the start week for circles. So if how many are in a circle right now? Raise your hand. How many are in? Raise them really, really high. Raise them high. Look around the room. That's fantastic. Relational connections, walking together as one, bearing life together, etc. If you're not in a circle, you need to be. Mike and the folks will sign you up afterwards. It's our small group system here called Circles. So encouraged to see so many of you, the majority of the church in. Get in. It starts September 20th. So all that's to say it's September. I'm sorry, James. Go to this slide here now. So we go to October. What lies ahead with kind of this launch in the next couple of weeks? Well, as you saw already, we put this slide up. What is happening beginning in October is new staff arrive on the scene. New full-time staff, I should say, and that's pretty significant. Kai Lane, in fact, I saw Kai over here. Kai, wave your hand way over here. Our brand new student ministries pastor, Kai, is in the house. So officially, he starts October 1st. And then October 15th, Alex Diaz, a next generation pastor. That's basically post-high school to young families, and just a dynamic young man, early 30s. He's bilingual from Venezuela, a worship leader, teaching pastor. We're really excited not only to have Kai, but Alex. Alex will start on October 15th. And then, of course, Maria Chung Again, extremely gifted in the doctoral program at Gordon Conwell's, run a multi-ethnic children's ministry for 15 years in Queens. Just so excited. She's going to make all of us look stupid. Speaks Chinese, Mandarin, dialects, English. I mean, she's a fireball, and so we're so excited. But we need to give God a collective shout of praise for 3 strong, full-time workers coming into the church at the exact moment that we need them. Now, one question I've had in the last few weeks, since we've been hiring and vetting different staff, is how can we afford, because we raise money for a building, how can you afford the building, new staff, et cetera? And that's a great question. So let me break it down for you in this way. First of all, as you know, back in January, Cesar left our church, resigned and went on to other things. And then Anthony recently, in fact, he just left at the end of August, et cetera. But just taking those 2 people as an example, when people leave a church or a job and you have a salary like they do, well, that gives you a chance to repurpose those dollars, right? So here's a way to see it. When we hired Cesar 11 years ago, we hired that man for that moment, right? And Cesar was wonderful. And the church wouldn't be who we are without his contribution through the years. But you don't, 11 years later, take that money and replace a Cesar because the moment has passed and there's a new need. Does that make sense? So that's what it means to repurpose salary. So we took Cesar's salary, you take Anthony's salary, and a couple other salary reductions, and you put it in a pot, and you go, okay, now for this moment in time, right? Who are the men and women that we need for this moment in time, and how do we repurpose those dollars to move us forward into the future? Does that make sense? So one way this happened is because we were able to repurpose staff dollars that went away with different resignations, et cetera. But another way, and I was never, I shouldn't say I wasn't going to ever tell you, I just didn't know that it was significant, but I was at a meeting recently, and I shared this story, and Deb Sadler, many of you know, Deb said, you've got to tell the church this story. So if you don't want to hear it, blame Deb. But she said, you got to tell this church this story. So here's another way that this is happening. As you know, for many years, I have represented our church in the collective multi-ethnic church movement and what that means to the country in many, many places around the country, and that continues to escalate, et cetera. But the reality financially on that is this church has basically 100% supported financially that work of God. Does that make sense? In other words, when I travel and I'm gone for 3 days or 2 days, that means I'm not here serving you in the moment. Does that make sense? But your dollars are funding my salary. And so we do that because early on this church recognized, I guess God has something bigger for us, not just in creating this church, but in fanning this type of flame around the country. And God he's using us amazingly so on that. And that's for another story for another day. But all that's to say, for the last several years, 3 to 4 years, I have been thinking and praying and dreaming and scheming in my mind, how would it be possible for me to make money, to get salary, not like additional income, but what if I could get paid from our national network, which is called Mosaic with an X? What if I could get paid from that side or a significant portion of my salary, and then I'd be able to return salary on this side to the church that could be repurposed and used for other people, right? Well, what happened was back in November, well, let me take it back. A summer ago, a friend of mine, I was in LA, he took me to lunch. He said, Mark, you got to think differently. He's the guy that taught me about thinking with a mindset of abundance, not a mindset of scarcity. Like not thinking like how much I don't have. Think about what God could do if you dream it, right? Like Abram, how far can you see? He's like, Mark, you see far away, but I'm telling you right now, you don't see far enough for this thing over here and what God is doing and et cetera. So Ray Chang, he really challenged me on that. So I started thinking about it, and so I thought, shoot, I'm going to go for it in my mind. So I put down numbers on paper on this side. And I said, man, if I could get this, and if I could get this for different staff and build out, almost like start a church, but it's like start a network, then I could return money to my church. And so in November of last year early, I went to a man that I know that has some money, needed to invest it in spiritual things, and I laid this plan out, and to this day, I've never heard from him. All right? So, yeah. But that's just what happens, man. You sow a seed and some of them come up, some don't. Maybe he will still, who knows? I haven't heard from him, so that could be good or bad. I don't know, but it's been 1 year. But because I did that, all right, in faithfulness, if you will, Then 2 weeks later, I found myself in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, I'm at Charlotte, North Carolina to consult a large church that is wanting to transition to become multi-ethnic. It'd be like a church like New Life or Fellowship or Emmanuel Baptist, something like that. The pastor and his executive pastor take me out to lunch. They go, well, tell me about you and your ministry. We'd never even met, but they flew me in to consult their church. So I start talking, and I get into this, and eventually, this, because it's on kind of the front of my tongue, I explain what I'm trying to do and how if I could do this here, it'll advance the movement out there, it'll help my church here. And I was not at all asking him for money. I wasn't even thinking. I just barely met the guy, right? Right out of his mouth. Just like that, when I finished, he said, if you tell me you can plant 1,000 multi-ethnic churches over the next 10 years in America, he goes, we want to partner with you. Like, invest and make this happen. My heart about leaped out of I was like, you know, I'm like, I was so scared the next words could really screw this thing up. You know, I was like, I had to take a deep breath and calm down. But make a long story short, because I need to move us forward. That began a conversation in November, and in July it came to fruition. $400,000 over 5 years to the national network, which allowed me to return 2/3. I don't get all that, by the way, but it allowed me to return 2/3 of my salary in the month of August to this church. And that is also how we're getting it. Now, and I want you to understand, this isn't just me, although I started the church, this mindset exists in the staff of this church. Years ago, we got Amos Gray, our first full-time student pastor. You know why? Because Triopia at the time, who was getting paid, said, I'll give him my salary. Use my salary. And whatever she's done for the church ever, she's done for free. Right? Years ago, we hired a guy, Stephen Weathers. He didn't have the contacts to raise support. I don't remember, but it was like 50% of my salary at the time. I said, or a third, I don't remember. But I said, take this, and I'll go raise more support. And it's not just Triopia and me. Others have that mindset. We've always had that. In my case right now, returning the salary, I'm only good for another 3 to 5 years. After that, I don't know how I'm going to get paid. But you see what I'm saying? But if it's a step of faith. Our whole staff lives like that. I can't tell you how many times we've been in elders meetings, whatever, and people fighting who's going to resign to put money in so the budget can be made. I'm serious, from Mike, Harry, everybody. But at the end of the day, Anthony, Cesar, and me were 3 of the 5 biggest salaries in this church. 2 and 2/3 of those just went away. It allows us to repurpose to get people like Kai, to get people like Alex, to get people like Maria, all in this moment. And that is a God thing. Didn't happen 3 years ago, didn't happen 5 years ago. It happened right now, God's perfect timing. Isn't that cool? And you just got to celebrate and say, thank the Lord for that. And by the way, it's too detailed, but let me just tell you this. The reason, in part, we're able to add Kai to student ministries right now is because Alex is out in Indiana right now raising support to assist Kai. So Alex is talking to people, raising support, not for himself, but to go to Kai. This is the kind of staff you have. I just want you to understand that. Self-sacrificing, always thinking what is best for this body. You really need to understand that. And I'm so thankful to serve along such people, because I've been in places that it's not like that. I'm telling you, this church, every staff person would lay down their salary, their life, etc., so that this body would continue. And we'll figure out what God will do with us later. You need to thank God for a staff like this. I promise you that that's the way it is. All right, I've taken way too much time with that. So, next slide, real quick. But I want you to know that. Thanks to Deb Sadler. Hope that was good. Now, in October also, we're going to have orientations going to begin. We got this basically, you know, my son, Will, just went to UCA. So I took him there, and just like school, right? You go through orientation, a brand new place, and so he had to go to this desk, this desk. He had to kind of check all these boxes, go to this, and then he gets his student card. So we got to thinking, you know, it's the same kind of thing. This is a whole new day for our church. It's a whole new season. It's a whole new place, everything, right? And so we ought to be as serious as a church as colleges are, universities, new job, employers, in bringing our people along in a systematic way to, as Joshua said to people, prepare yourselves for this season. So what we're going to do is on October 25th and then again on November 1st, 2 Sundays, we're going to do macro kind of orientation training. If you miss one or both of those days, we'll ask you to watch that online. And once you've seen those two messages, then we're going to have a class to get eyeball to eyeball with, as elders and staff, with every person in the church, in a sense to say, you watch that, you understand it, you got this, any questions you have, because we just don't want to say it to everybody. We want to look you in the eye, and we want to hear from you. I'm in, I'm on it, I get it, And at a macro level, what Harry would tell you, although these terms relate to a building, this is really what's happening beyond just a building. But we are moving from renters to owners. Have you ever made that jump? Like when you rent an apartment or whatever, and all of a sudden you own your first house? Okay, and it works because we're doing this in a building. We're actually renting and owning, but it's beyond just the building. I want you to understand it. But if you wanted to think about it at a macro level, what we need to get straight, we need to understand the difference between being renters and owners of the building, of this ministry, of involvement, of investment. We're no longer renters, and we want to make sure, we want to look you in the eye. We want to hear from you. Eyeball to eyeball, you get that, and can help us move forward with new attitude. We've done some work in the summer. Mike, Harry, and others will present all that. But 3 sessions, as it were, to prepare ourselves in orientation. That makes sense? You guys cool with that? Yeah? All right? All 7 of you? You guys really cool with that, right? I mean, you get it, right? All right, I want to make sure you get it. We need to do this, and trust me, it's going to be a lot better if we do. All right, next slide, November. And then we'll hit November. On November 22nd, it's a Sunday morning, we're going to do a Thanksgiving prayer walk to the new facility. All right? And we're thinking about, again, Israel, we might as well stay with the analogy. We're going to march. I don't know that we'll march around it 7 times. That's another story. But we're going to get over, we are literally, we've already applied for a permit, a parade permit. And we were thinking of doing this in January, but it could be snow, rain, you know what I'm saying? We've typically had good weather around Thanksgiving, so we're hoping that'll work and everything. But on that Sunday, children, everybody, we're going to start here. We're going to have a fun time. We're literally going to parade and march to the new building and stake our claim in prayer, thank the Lord, all that kind of stuff that morning. Does that sound good? Yeah. So we're going to do that on November 22nd. And then the next day, on November 26th, just later on, of course, that'll be, I think it's like our 10th or 11th annual Thanksgiving festival here on Thanksgiving Day, 11 to 1 for the community. All this is in writing, by the way. Don't feel like you got to write it down. We'll give it to you on a piece of paper. Then we'll hit December. So in December, Compassion International, how many of you have heard of Compassion International before, right? I got good friends in the national office. They have this really cool RV that they drive all over the country. It's branded for Compassion. You walk onto the RV, and it's a 15-minute experience of what Compassion does around the world. Naturally, their desire is to promote Compassion, to see people adopt, take children. Our family adopted a child. I went on a Compassion trip in Ecuador last summer. So we have a little girl in Ecuador. Compassion is amazing. And boy, I'm telling you, we'd write a letter. It gets to that home. I've seen it. I've been on the ground. But all that's to say, as part to help them, to bless us, and a little bit of kind of marketing for our new facility, all that wrapped into one. They're bringing their Compassion experience to Little Rock. So it's not just for us, it's for the whole community. On December 4th through 7th, it'll be parked on our new parking lot. And so during those days, you can go. It's a 15-minute tour. Tell your friends. The whole community will know about it. We'll get press on that. But not only for Compassion in the church, but again, just part of that momentum building that there's something new happening coming. So the Compassion experience will be here then. And then on December 6th, I can't wait, our Mo Kids Christmas program right here, right? Sarah and all the kids will be singing and doing their thing for us on the night of the 6th, December. And then check this out, December 27th, 2015, the last and final service in this space. Last and final service. That's a big deal. Now, you may be traveling. It may be Christmas, I know, but whoever has is here, have that privilege, we will say goodbye. And I'll save some analogies for the future, but this will be our last service because we'll be moving over the Christmas holidays. Won't do anything on New Year's Eve, any of that stuff, because we'll be getting prepared for what's ahead. But don't miss December 27th, the final service, shutting down this lifeline, as it were, for us here, and all that'll mean. And then we hit January. So check it out. First service in the new building, first Sunday in January, January 3rd. All right? That's what we're shooting for. Now, and again, if something major goes wrong construction-wise, we're going to have to adjust. But everything's on track. It's all looking good. So we're setting these dates out by faith for you on that January 3rd. Now, check the next one, though, is the grand opening will be on the 10th. And the reason for that is because the 3rd is school starts on the 4th. So some people are still out of town, traveling, etc. The 3rd's kind of still in the holiday weekend. It's the very end of it. So we didn't want to do a big grand opening. Plus, the staff's got to do a lot of stuff over the holidays, etc. So we'll do a first service. Then we'll do a grand opening, big celebration on the 10th. And both those will be at 10:30. And then check this out. We moved to 2 services on January 17th. That's Martin Luther King service. We moved to 2 services. We've waited for several years to get back to 2 services. We miss a lot of people because of time. People work all night. they can't make it, they can't wait till 10:30. There's all kinds of reasons, but growth, momentum, maturity as a church, you've got to get to 2+ services. We've waited till this moment to do it. So on the 17th, we will go to 2 services, and that's how it'll work. So first service, grand opening, and then the 2 service on the 17th, all right? Now, that's kind of the calendar and put it all away, all right? So that's the momentum, that's the months, that's our preparation. Now let me share with you what God has done financially and right where we're at this moment, right? So if you look out on the board, which I didn't get a chance to get in here and repaint the wall that we've had up for 9 years, the baseball diamond, you know, some of the numbers fall off. It's like zeros up there. I mean, I got to get up there. So we got to get up and update it. But if you look on the wall, and we use a baseball analogy, second base says move and third base says improve. Well, that's what we envision. But that's not how God did things. God did things a little bit different, right? All for our good and for his glory. So what he did is actually he switched those 2 bases on us, as it turns out. Because the building got improved first, and then we're going to get to move, right? So this, again, is what God did. We laid our plans, we did our best, and God said, hey, that's great, but let me help you a little further, right? So I wanted you to see that switch. Now take a look what that means. So next slide, please. What happened then, the reason we were able to improve first, which ultimately is the reason we're able to move now, is because we signed in December of 2013, as you know, a $1 million, roughly right at $1 million 10-year lease with 10 Fitness, as well as they invested then over the coming months, $1.7 million in infrastructure. So in other words, they spent $1.7 million on heat and air and electric and all that. And you know why that's significant to note? Because that all is to our credit. That's what's equity. That's called equity. You see what I'm saying? So we're not talking about desks and equipment machines. We're talking about stuff, structural changes to that building. So that's a $2.7 million investment over 10 years that all essentially goes to our credit. It makes us, our valuation goes up with the bank, the equity goes up in the building, and all that helped us to ultimately get our loans. So we thank God for 10 Fitness and what he did with Eric Buckner and those people for us. So we got to say that. And because of all that, then what that allowed us to do, and by the way, over the journey, we've been turned down by 7 banks, and 2 said yes. So we were 2 for 9, I guess, all right? But it only takes 1, right? 1 or 2. So Arvis, thank God for them. They got us going with the purchase, but then thank God for First Security Bank, because with what 10 Fitness did and the valuation, we just took out a $2.8 million loan in July, closed on the loan 1st of August, and that's what allows us to go forward. Now, you don't see 2.8 there, you see 1.84, because part of that loan paid off what we owed Arvis. So we switched, right? So of the 2.8, about 1.2 or so went to Arvis, so that just restructured the mortgage. That left us with not only about 1.5 from the loan, but we brought to the table another $300,000 cash that we'd been saving in our Merrill Lynch account. So the total amount that we started this current construction project that allows us to move in is 1.84. That's what we have, and that's what we're spending right now. And by the way, the loan is affordable, and I'll show you that at the end. Now hold that or forget that for a moment. We're underway with 1.84. And by the way, in case I forget to say this, my wife Linda wanted me to make sure you knew, we are, no matter what I show you, we are moving on January 3rd. Okay, just keep that in mind. We are moving into the building on January 3rd, all right? But forget this for a moment. I want to talk to you about the future that could be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 2 years from now, but it's not essential that we get from third to home. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, that in order to get in the building, that's almost like icing on the cake. We want to do it. I hope this church will do it. I hope I live long enough to see this church do it. But I just want you to understand, going from third to home is not essential for us getting in the building, making things happen. All right? But let me show you what the future looks like. All right? So next slide, please. The first thing, once we turn the corner in third base, is we've got to get Hubert his kitchen. All right? I mean, we're all getting older here, and he has served us faithfully for 14, 15 years. This man needs a full kitchen here to bless the community. We need it, etc. And we've already got the equipment, right? We got that donated years ago from Camp Aldersgate, shrink-wrapped it, and saved it for this moment. But still, it's going to take some money. So we've got to get Hubert's kitchen for him, for the church, etc., the community. The next one is this. Then we want to construct an iconic prayer tower and prayer at the front entrance of the church. Now, you see this on your bulletin if you got a bulletin, but let me just show you a couple pictures here. Take a look at this. This would be the ultimate front. We will not be looking like this on January 3rd. Let me just make that clear. All right? We're going to walk through 2 nice glass doors cut out of the building. Okay, that's it. But this is the first shot. There's a night shot of it, and then turn to the side if you would. One more slide. You see the cross cut out? Now go back if you would, James, 1 or 2 slides. Let me tell you why this is significant. There's 3 reasons. First of all, and there's tons of imagery and all that in there. But the first thing is every community in Little Rock has an iconic structure. Every one of them. You go downtown, you go a place that's like an anchor, iconic area that people take pride in. And I won't go through all the different places. This area has UALR, thank God it does, what is great. But outside of Euler, and once Village Theater shut down and ultimately literally got torn down, there is nothing iconic in this entire community that people take pride in. They can say, that's our community. That's what, and you know what's happening? 10 Fitness is already bringing that about. Okay? We want an iconic entrance for this community. We want it to be as nice. If you flew in on an airplane and you saw it, not for our own pride. I really want you to hear that. That's why it's not essential. But we want to give this community some iconic structure, which that entire building will be, so that they say, that's the anchor of this community, that's where it is. Secondly, we want it to be about Jesus. We want it to be about him, that he gets the credit, right? Because when you look downtown and you see the revitalization downtown, who gets the credit for that? I don't know, city fathers, city mothers. Thank God for them. It's awesome. I love what's gone on downtown. You see, but it's people, it's individuals. When you plant that big, like 60-foot cross or whatever it is, man, it's like boom. It's Jesus gets the credit. That's the one. Because Dr. Anderson will tell you that outside of the school and together with the school, this church has been the #1 partner over the last 10 years in bringing this community back in job creation, economic development, the buildings, etc. And of course, Dr. Anderson is a believer, a follower of Christ. So we want to make it so Christ is up front. Christ, everybody knows this happened because of Jesus. And lastly, prayer has been so essential to this church in the beginning. This isn't just a tower with a cross, it's a prayer tower. So go back a slide. When you walk through those, no, I'm sorry, James, back one. When you walk through the glass doors, if you walked in and turned right, it's a prayer room. And you walk into a block prayer room that's like the Israel, where like the Wailing Wall, where you can put prayers in the wall and pray. And when you look up, it's the sky and the cross. And it puts prayer right up front. It puts Jesus right up front. And it says this community is happening and excited, and it's iconic for them. That's why we want to build that entrance someday. And many more things I can tell you. But let's go on for now. So that's the front entrance prayer tower. And then lastly, a permanent sanctuary. Within the space we're building out right now, that we've left 15 to 16,000 square feet unfinished. And looking ahead, someday that's the permanent sanctuary, right? Now, let me just tell you, the sanctuary we're coming into, you're going to think it's permanent. I mean, there's walls, there's doors, I mean, it's awesome. It really is good. And it's going to be permanent as long as we need it to be permanent. But we've arranged and designed the plans to flip that and to put another permanent sanctuary, more permanent for the future. And then what you do is you'd add classrooms, children's space, more offices. You'd build out the space that will be our sanctuary for a while. But we have that in the future. Again, we don't need that now, but you look ahead to growth, et cetera. We've left room and made provision for that, right? So I just wanted to give you a sense of what third to fourth to home looks like, that run. And you can take a look at the next slide. I think I included just some costs, and you can see why it's put off to the future, because to get all of that and more would be about $2 to $2.2 million is what it would take to do it. And I think God is going to do it, but I'm saying again, we don't need to push for that at all right now or any time in the future. We'll let God take care of that, but it's on the docket. So next slide. This is what I want you to focus on right now in the moment. Is a figure $395,000. It's the fall financial focus. It's our goal by the end of December to raise both from in and outside this church, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so next slide. And see, that's that little gap. Oh, go back one. Again, I'm going to reemphasize, we are moving. So that 395 doesn't mean we're not moving. It just gets us in, like, I don't know, I played baseball. We go sliding in, diving in, you're all dirty and everything. We're going to be sliding in, diving in dirty, uniform. Then you get up on the base and you dust yourself off. You ever think? And you stand up tall and you take your lead moving to home. So what's happening at this moment is we're sliding in hard to third. But we want to be able to stand up on that base, dust ourselves off, and take our lead off for home. Does that make sense? A little bit of analogy for all 7 of you. Okay, well, anyway, we got it. We are moving, but there is a gap. So let me explain the gap. Next slide. 395. First of all, I've already shared this with you. We have 1.84 million right now in hand that we're spending on construction. And about 1.5 of that or so is an affordable loan. Like, in other words, we really don't want to borrow more than that. All right? We could, but we don't want to. So here's the next slide. What we must raise to pay all the bills with the current construction by the end of December is $100,000. On your cards here, and we'll give them out at the end of this, guys, but what that $100,000 adds up to is this. $42,000, when we closed the loan, the bank knew we were going to be $42,000 short. But rather than Gus Swain going to $162, they said, just get to $120 and we'll get it going. All right? So we knew we were going to be $42 short. We added $21,000 of LED lighting. We just made that change because that's going to save a ton of money over time. Right? But it's going to cost us $21 on the front, but it'll save a lot on the end. So that's there. $21,000 for an HVAC design, the heat and air, etc. And then we have to build flood doors because the building's in a floodway. You have to satisfy some FEMA requirements, and basically the grand total is right at about $100,000. Now, if we didn't raise 1 penny towards that $100,000, so that's what I want you to understand. That's a priority. $100,000 is what we got to come up with as a church in the community, whatever, in the next 4 months. If that didn't happen, all right, in theory, we would owe bills at the end of this thing. We'd still move, but we would owe $100,000 worth of bills, right? And you'd have contractors hanging out there, which we don't want to do. In the worst case scenario, we could borrow it from our equity, but that's adding debt, right, which we don't want to do. Does that make sense? So we've got to get $100,000 to finish what we're doing now without owing anyone anything and without taking on more debt. Make sense? Okay, hold that thought. Next slide. Then there's about $295,000 that we need beyond that 100 to, again, stand tall on third base. This is all explained in the handout, but real quick, just sharing with you. For instance, the east parking lot, remember we just did the whole west parking lot? Many of you have been over there. The east parking lot, closer to University, it's got potholes. You could drive a Volkswagen and park it in and you'd never see it, all right? I mean, it's not surfaced, it's not striped, it's horrible. Do you understand what I'm saying? We got an estimate the other day, $120,000 to fix that. I think we can get it down in the 80-85 range. But the point is, you can go into this beautiful, everything's great, and you got this horrible eyesore parking lot that's bad, right? We've got to get that fixed. It doesn't have to be fixed to get us in, but you're going to want to fix it, right? We're going to want to fix it. So that's about $85,000. We have not 1 penny put aside for furnishings in this building. We put every dollar just to making it nice, bathroom, children's space. We got to have furnishings, right? You got to have office furnishing. You got to have some tables and chairs. There's some basic furnishings, just like a house. You could own a house, but you got to furnish it, right? So that's kind of in that figure. We have to buy a sign for the street. Did you know that's a city code? Like, you literally have to put a sign on University that advertises the church. We won't build a big, nice one to start, just something, but it could be $10,000, $15,000 just for a sign on the street to meet city code. Paul researched $5,000 for an electric children's check-in system where you'd have key fobs and the whole deal. So to make a long story short, for sake of time, all those extra little costs that would allow us to stand tall on third, dust ourselves off, look ahead to the future, and know we've got there is another $295,000. Again, it's explained on your sheet, right? So with that in mind, next slide, please. The total needed to do all of that was $2.235 million. Next slide. You can just go on. 1.8 is what we've got right now. That means 395 is our goal by December 2015 in cash pledges from within and outside the church. And then take a look at this. The other thing, though, is when you see that number, it sounds huge, and it is for our church. But if I took more time, I'd tell you this. We've come $5.6 million to this point, whether from us or from 10 Fitness, etc. You told me that 9 years ago, I never would have thought it possible. So I just want you to know, we're at the tail end. We've come $5.6 million. We're down to about $400,000 to get to this moment, right? So it's nothing for God. It can be done. But for a church and it's nothing for a lot of people in the city. It's not for churches, but for us it's a lot, which gives us a chance to pray, gives us a chance to remain dependent and humble, and get on our knees. But what I wanted you to know is to break that number down. Right now, based on the year ago, the 100X campaign that pushed us to get to this moment and get the loan, there's still about $200,000 in this church from people who pledged in the 100X campaign but still haven't given, or at least given all their pledge, right? So in other words, and I don't know who they are, but if everybody in this church that had pledged to give $200,000 could do that, and of course, if you could accelerate the time, so it's not 2 years to get it, but it's earlier, that of the 395, we've already had people in this church say, I'll give 200. Isn't that interesting? So really, you put that in there, you're only about 195 away, which makes it a lot more palatable. Do you see what I'm saying? And realistic. But all that's to say is that's kind of our fall financial focus for our church. We will be beating the doors down out in the community at churches and people we know. But in general, the macro goal is if we could get to 395, we are going to be standing tall on third when we move in, etc. And that's what we want to shoot for. Remember, our whole thing has always been pray as we go, pay as we go. I told you we have 1.1 million in equity, right? We could borrow the 395. We could do that. But what does that do? It increases our debt, right? And we don't want to be the kind of church that takes on debt for a building and lays people off to pay for it. You see what I'm saying? So we figured out what we believe as elders we can afford to stay tight and true to the mission, and we want to stay there. That's why we don't want to go borrow that money, right? So we want to pray for it, we want to go for it, etc. Last couple slides, I think. So I want you to understand this in closing. To God be the glory. As the old song says, great things he has done. In December 2012, 6 years after we signed a contract, we put $600,000 down, and we borrowed 1.1, that should have an M after it, 1.1 million to buy the building 3 years ago. In 3 years later, in December, that building is going to be, it's got 1.1 million equity. So I was flipping my brain. We borrowed, check it out, in December 2012, we borrowed 1.1 million. 3 years later, we have 1.1 million equity. That building in value went in 3 years from 1.5 million to 3.9 million in value, which gives us 1.1 million equity because we only took a $2.8 million loan. This is only God. Do you understand that? This isn't Mark DeYmaz. This isn't smart business people. This isn't people with deep pockets. This is God. And we need to celebrate and thank him for that. Next slide. Not only that, but the bank forced us to save $87,000. It's the equivalent of 1 year's mortgage, and put it in the bank as reserve just in case there was a little financial crisis and we couldn't pay our mortgage. We've got $87,000 reserved in the bank, right? And that's to God's glory. And then the last slide, please. Right here, the $2.8 million from the loan that we took is actually $2 million, and I want you to see this. It's not just one, it's two loans, 1.5 and 1.3. The $1.5 million loan is entirely funded by the rent rolls. Just take a look at that. The payment is about $8,400 a month. We make $9,000 a month come October on that building in rent. Do you understand this? This is only God, okay? And then that leaves 1.3, which again is about $7,400 a month in payment. We've paid $3,200 a month on this building for 11 years. So it's only about a $4,000 or so increase, which we've already budgeted, part of our reductions in salary. We've thought about that and budgeted for that, okay? So in other words, on a $16,000 note, this church is only paying just over $7,000. That is only God. And once we get that restaurant down the road, that's going to go down another 1,000 or 2 or 3. And ultimately, we're going to get this thing down. That's our goal. We might be paying the same amount of money here that we paid over there. That's what I want to do, except this time we got equity in the building. We created jobs in the building, both at you see what I'm saying? Only God. And we need to understand and thank him for that incredible journey he's taken us on. The wheels are down, right? We are about to land this plane. And somebody said to me, aren't you tired of raising money? Yes, I am so tired of raising money. But I'm sure Moses got tired after 40 years, right? I'm sure Joshua taking those battles and all, that's just what it takes. Somebody's got to lead. I didn't ask to lead. I just wanted to do a church like this. They don't teach you this stuff in seminary, right? But to make this happen, we collectively have to step up and say, we're going to get it done. We're going to go where God said to go. We're going to trust him for it. We're going to do what we can, and we're going to trust him to do for us what we can. We're going to pay as we go. We're going to pray as we go. We're going to prepare ourselves as we go. And we are going on January 3rd to a brand new home for this church. Amen. Amen. Well, God bless you. Thanks so much for letting me do that. Mike, come on, take us home this morning. We're going to pass these these sheets out on the way out. They explain both the calendar and the some of the money. Of course, if you have any questions, ask the elders, ask myself. We'll be glad to explain. There's a lot more detail. For those of you who like detail, we can give that to you. But again, thanks so much for listening. What an exciting time. Momentum, right? Preparation, thanksgiving, and celebration. To God be the glory. Mike?